What drives change in society? What explains the conflicts that we see in politics, economics, and even in our personal lives? These questions were at the heart of Mao Zedong's On Contradiction, a foundational text in Marxist philosophy and revolutionary practice. Today, on the Left Library, we'll break down Mao's On Contradiction. We'll explore its key ideas, why contradictions are central to understanding the world, and how this theory shaped the revolutionary movements. So, let's dive in. Mao Zedong wrote On Contradiction in 1937, during a critical moment in China's revolutionary struggle against Japanese invasion and internal class conflict. This essay is a cornerstone of Mao's thought, providing a theoretical foundation for understanding change and revolution. Mao builds on dialectical materialism, a concept rooted in Marxism. Dialectical materialism teaches that change arises from contradictions, opposing forces or tendencies in society, nature, and thought. But Mao takes this further, focusing on how contradictions operate in specific contexts. Open quote, "The law of contradiction in things, that is, the law of unity of opposites, is the fundamental law of materialist dialectics." End quote. In simple terms, contradictions are the driving forces behind development and change. Without contradictions, there's no movement, there's no progress. For Mao, contradictions exist everywhere, in society, nature, and in thought. He defines a contradiction as a unity of opposites, meaning two opposing forces are interdependent but also in struggle. So let's break this down and make it a bit simpler. One, there's a unity. So opposites depend on each other to exist. For example, workers and capitalists are opposites, but one can't exist without the other within a capitalist system. And two, struggle. That these opposites are constantly in conflict. Workers want better wages, while capitalists want higher profits. This constant conflict drives change. Mao argues that understanding these contradictions is key to understanding the world. He writes, open quote, "The motion of opposites in all things, their conflict and their resolution, is what drives change." This idea builds directly on Karl Marx's concept of class struggle, where contradictions between classes, like the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, lead to revolutionary change. Not all contradictions are equally important. Mao introduces the idea of principal contradictions and secondary contradictions. Principal contradictions are seen as the main conflict driving change at a given moment. In China, for example, during Mao's time, the principal contradiction was the struggle between imperialism, from Japan's invasion, and the Chinese people. Secondary contradictions are other contradictions that exist but are subordinate to the principal contradiction. For example, internal class conflicts within China were secondary during the war against Japan. Mao writes, open quote, "In a complex process, there are many contradictions, but one of them is necessarily the principal contradiction, whose existence and development determine or influence the existence and development of other contradictions." End quote. One of Mao's most original contributions is the idea of the particularity of conditions. He argues that every contradiction is specific to its context. The way contradictions manifest in one place might be entirely different elsewhere. For example, Mao emphasized that China's revolution couldn't follow the same path as Russia's. China was largely agrarian, with peasants making up the majority of its population. The contradiction between landlords and peasants was more central in China than the contradiction between industrial workers and capitalists. Mao writes, "Each form of motion contains its own particular contradiction, and this constitutes the particular essence of each thing." End quote. This means that revolutionaries must analyze the specific contradictions of their time and place. Universal principles, like class struggle, must be applied in particular ways. This is why Mao's revolution focused on mobilizing the peasantry, unlike the urban, worker-centered revolution in Russia. Contradictions don't last forever. They're resolved through struggle. But Mao emphasizes that resolving one contradiction often leads to new contradictions. Change is an ongoing process. For example, in a revolution, the contradiction between the working class and the ruling class might be resolved by overthrowing the bourgeoisie, but new contradictions will emerge, such as debates over how to build socialism within that national sphere. Mao writes, "The resolution of a contradiction leads to the emergence of new contradictions. This is the process of the endless development of the world." End quote. This is why revolution isn't a single event. It's a continuous process of addressing contradictions as and where they arise. Mao's theory of contradiction wasn't just philosophical. It shaped his revolutionary strategy. During China's civil war, Mao applied the principle of focusing on the principal contradiction. He prioritized defeating Japan and imperialism over internal class struggles, rallying both workers and the peasantry to unite against a common enemy. Similarly, Mao's emphasis on the particularity of contradictions, helped him to adapt Marxist theory to China's unique conditions. By focusing on mobilizing peasants rather than workers in cities, he built a revolutionary base in rural areas, which ultimately led to the Communist Party's victory in 1949. So why should we care about On Contradiction today? Well, Mao's analysis of contradiction helps us to understand the conflicts shaping our world. For example, climate change, where the principal contradiction is between capitalist profit motives and the need to preserve the environment. And global inequality, where the contradiction between the richness of the global north and the poorness of the global south drives exploitation and resistance. Mao teaches us to identify contradictions, analyze their particularities, and focus on the principal contradiction in order to successfully drive change. Mao Zedong's On Contradiction is more than just a philosophical text. It's a guide to understanding and transforming the world around us. By recognizing contradictions and analyzing their specific context, we can uncover the forces driving change and chart a path forward. As Mao said, "Where there is struggle, there is development." End quote. If you enjoyed this summary, don't forget to give us a like, subscribe, and even share to people you think might enjoy. And let us know in the comments, what other Marxist texts would you like to hear explained? Until next time, this has been the Left Library, your home for simplified political theory, and we'll see you soon.